Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss the latest anger from the fishing and farming community over the government's ambivalence over their plight as a direct result of their ever-changing interpretation of Brexit. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So pigs first, then fish. So over the past few months, food production has been hit pretty hard in Brexit Britain. Due to a lack of seasonal labour, farms were unable to adequately look after and then harvest crops, the ones that they planted for this year. As a result, they are planting less next year. There is also a critical shortage of workers in food processing, as well as the now famous shortage of HGV drivers. So even food that can be produced is having a hard time being distributed to the shops. Communities further away from the main network of road and rail and away from major distribution centres have been hit the hardest, of course, and these are direct consequences of the end to freedom of movement that the Home Secretary was boasting about this week. But then there have been non-Brexit issues where Brexit has made the situation much worse. So a shortage of gas supplies meant fertiliser plants closed down. That meant an end to our domestic supply of carbon dioxide, which is used at various stages of food production. The pig and poultry industry are particularly badly affected by this latest kick in the teeth. So then Boris Johnson was asked about this in an interview at the weekend, that due to the problems, it is not possible to get all the pigs reared to the supermarket shelves. There's the problem with lack of workers, food production, lack of skilled butchers, lack of CO2, lack of all sorts of things. So they were going to have to be destroyed. And this was brought, I talked about this some time ago as well. This has been a problem brewing for weeks now. Well, the pigs were going to die anyway, was the Prime Minister's defence. Because, there's absolutely no difference at all in 120,000 pigs being killed for meat and just being incinerated for no use whatsoever. The interviewer, Andrew Marr, said that this would be the single biggest cull of healthy animals ever in the history of British agriculture. Johnson also decided to blame the industry for not paying enough, which ignores the fact that we simply don't have the resources in this country. There aren't enough trained butchers in the country. Increasing the wages doesn't stop that. Those fertiliser plants that closed due to a lack of gas, whose wages should they have increased to get them up and running again? They closed down because of a lack of gas. It's the same with every sector suffering critical shortages. I went to Tesco this week. I tend to alternate around a few different supermarkets just to see the relative impact of shortages. They are by and large muted where I am. I live at the heart of a major network of road freight. I live near major ports and near large distribution centres. So the shortages are not as bad near me as they are in some other parts of the country. And also, generally, Tesco has done better than most to get the workers it needs for deliveries and all sorts. But even here, the shortages are clear. Large gaps in the sections for pork and poultry products. One section of their prepared foods was just closed. It's closed completely. It was like no attempt to fill the shelves with just something else, because that's been done quite a bit. You look at some things, you try and find something that's not there. But there's a whole shelf of these things where they used to just have one shelf. No, they just thought, we haven't got enough, we'll just shut it down. Frozen chips also affected. I warned of this at the end of summer as well. Due to the floods in Northern Europe, we were going to have a bit of a shortage of light frozen chips and stuff. And there it is. Again, everything we are warned about by those involved in the supply chain pans out exactly as they describe. Because do you know what? They can see what's going to happen. They can see something long before it becomes evident to us. They know the chain of events that's going to happen. That's why, although I don't panic buy food, there's a joint of gammon and a pork shoulder in our freezer right now for Christmas. But what seems worse than the problems that are creating this crisis is the Prime Minister's response to it. See, it's not just that he's allowed these problems to occur. Governments do some stupid things at times. So he's allowed them to occur despite the warnings well in advance. But it's not just down to that. It's like, okay, well, you made this mess. Can you now clean it up? It's not even that he's been too slow to react to them now that the crisis is here. It's that he continues to make clear in interviews that he either doesn't care or doesn't see it as his job to manage it. Like his comments about, pigs die anyway, suggests he just doesn't care about the crisis. His comment about it being the fault of the food industry suggests that what problems he is prepared to accept, he doesn't see as his job to fix. someone else's job. And I constantly have to do that. Why are people asking the Prime Minister, if you don't think it's your job to fix the problem, why are you in government? Why don't you let someone else take over who does see it as their job to fix these problems? If you are not going to govern, go away. You know, it resulted in the bizarre sight this week of some in the industry, pig farmers, protesting in Manchester outside the Tory party conference. You wouldn't normally think of any group of farmers protesting against the Conservatives, yet here we are. Then we have the latest plight of the fishing industry, the poster boys of Brexit. British fishermen were going to win big out of Brexit. Not just any old Brexit, a hard Brexit, that's the way to go. The latest reports are of these Brexit poster boys on course to have lost £300 million by 2026, which is the year when the whole thing comes up for negotiation again. To add some context, because large numbers like this are fairly meaningless on their own, in 2019, the last full year of EU membership, UK fishing boats landed £987 million worth of produce. So 300 million over 5 years would represent an average of about 60 million loss a year. In actual fact, it's supposed to be about 64 million because it's rounded up to 300 million. And that would translate into just over a 6% loss for the industry that it was told would gain. And that is bearing in mind that we can still sell much of our catch to markets around Europe. Remember, there are still some who want us to ditch this thin deal that we agreed with the EU and take back all of our quotas, as they phrase it. That would mean being unable to sell fish in Europe at all, apart from in Britain. Or more specifically, that tariffs would be payable on them and the level on checks would be increased, because where these checks would have to happen would be in countries where their own fishing communities would hassle the government very hard to make sure that they presented extra trade barriers to us. And to the point where it would be, in practical terms, almost impossible to sell in Europe. And what's caused this reduction? Well, some fish just can't be sold in the EU at all now. Famously, the Category B live bivalve molluscs can't. And because we don't have the processing facilities in Britain to purify them for sale in the EU, can't be sold. So that's one chunk of the fishing community knackered. Then the fish that can still be sold is subject to lengthy administration, which means that the catch isn't as fresh by the time it can get to the markets of Europe, and also because of the bottlenecks you can't get as much through. So because of the delays, you can't sell as much, and what you can sell commands a lower price due to a lack of freshness at times. Then we have the situation of, for example, the Coquella. Huge vessel that used to catch about 10% of the fish sold in our fish and chip shops, but not in British waters. You know, because of the government's failure to negotiate continued access to Norwegian waters, the Coquella is not so much grounded now. It does go out now and then, but it's scraps. You know, it needs to be remembered, we had UK fishermen fishing in other people's waters as well. Now, not so much. Its crews are 60% down on income this year because they haven't been able to go out as much, and what they have been able to go out for isn't as lucrative. They're scratching around, as opposed to their usual pre-Brexit runs. So that's more of our fish that will now be caught by foreign fishermen. That meal of fish and chips that Boris Johnson pretended to enjoy in his crass promo earlier this week, for those who saw it, was probably made entirely with foreign produce. The main question for me, as a result of this, however, is what will those industries do about it? We're talking about farming and fishing, which have been supportive of the Conservatives in recent years. Both fishing and farming communities strongly supported Boris Johnson in 2019. Small protests aside, like the one in Manchester this week, what's the reason for their lack of a sustained campaign to get themselves heard? Embarrassment that they enabled this? A feeling of shame that they were conned? Or is it just that they don't know how to protest? Not being industries that have ever felt the need to take a British government on in an existential crisis because governments have always backed them, perhaps they simply have never had to think of such action. In the meantime, their businesses will shrink. With reduced access to export markets, the fishing industry can only diminish. We simply don't have much of a taste for British fish in Britain, fish caught in British waters. We export most of what is caught here, and most of the fish we eat is caught elsewhere. I mean, tastes can change over time, but they're not going to change that quickly, if they do at all. As for the pig farmers, exporting is the least of their worries right now. They can't even supply their own internal market. There are no barriers in trade between their farms and the shops. It's all part of the same British market. They just don't have the people needed to pass the products from one link in the chain to the next. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Brexit actually makes it harder for us to sell our own products to ourselves. That is the maddest thing about Brexit. The focus is often quite rightly on international trade, but even intranational trade is knackered. But it's mostly our exports that we harm, because while we're unable to supply our own markets with pork, imports from the EU have increased. So, pork that you may be getting this Christmas that may be on the shelves is almost certainly going to be coming from the EU now. That's what's happened. Same with the turkeys. The EU are benefiting from Brexit. We are suffering. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.